Ah, Regency England. A time of elegance, empire waistlines, and evenings that ended with candlelight rather than another episode of something starring an actor who looks wistfully out of windows. But beneath the gleaming chandeliers and society balls lay the rather, shall we say, earthy truths of daily life. Yes, listeners, today we begin our journey into the world of cleanliness, or often the lack thereof, in this era of powdered wigs and perpetual politeness. Imagine waking up in a quaint Georgian home, where the stone walls do a fine job of keeping out the drafts, but less so when it comes to the demands of morning ablutions. The Georgian style, graceful though it might have been, did not prioritize what we modern folks consider essential bathroom amenities. Picture yourself stepping into your washroom. Rather than the comforting whoosh of a shower, you're greeted by the stoic stare of a jug and basin. Indoor plumbing was an architectural twinkle in someone's eye, far off. In the future, water, that simple element we whisk effortlessly from our taps, was a substance of careful contemplation. It was something that had to be brought into the home, not by the magic of pipes, but by the strong backs of hard-working individuals, be they servants or side-gigging youngsters. For the fashionable and the fortuitous, washing one's face in the mornings meant standing over a washstand, splashing your visage with the room-temperature water brought up hours before. Perhaps a pinch of lavender or rosewater was mixed in for those who truly wished to start their day smelling more botanical than bog-like. The Regency was an era when full-body bathing was considered an irregular indulgence. A quick sponging off or a so-called washdown was the norm. It was a thrifty approach, certainly, conserving precious water and one's hard-earned morning time. Baths meant heaving large quantities of water into a portable tub. Luxury indeed. Soap was a little different from our modern, perfumed and bubbly bars. Often hard and somewhat harsh, it was practical, considered just the thing for scrubbing off the urban grime. This rudimentary soap had the added benefit of leaving your skin with a texture akin to rough parchment, just perfect for initializing screenplays with quill and ink. Of course, alongside the personal care routines, laundry was a regal affair, met with both dread and a dash of drama. Clothes would be soaked in lye, stomped mercilessly, and left to wave proudly in the breeze. Cleanliness in the fabric domain functioned with its own cadence and seasonality, as garb was aired, brushed, and, if absolutely necessary, washed. Stains were socially acceptable, as long as you wore yours with dignity. But let's not forget teeth, those pearly supports of Regency smiles. Toothbrushes existed, bristles made of hog's hair, which sounds quaintly medieval compared to today's ergonomic designs. Toothpaste, if one was so fortunate, might involve a mix of baking soda and charcoal, a true dynamic duo for sparkling teeth and stained cuffs. So there you lay, listening as the clock ticks and the candle flickers beside you, pondering life among those Regency aficionados who might just have defined phrases like make do and mend or smell of the day. As we slide gently into the inviting cradle of slumber, think of our ancestors with a smile and perhaps gratitude for our modern bathrooms. If these stories help you drift off, please subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world to me. And before you fully fade into dreamland, I would love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Until next time, lie back, relax, and let your thoughts meander gently amid the delights of history's oddities. Imagine yourself stepping lightly into the elegant drawing rooms of Regency England, where the women are dressed in their empire waistgowns, flowing softly to the floor, and the gentlemen cut a dashing figure in their perfectly tied cravats. But just below this veneer of sophistication lies a less known and, one might say, slightly musty truth. Daily cleanliness was more of a noble aspiration than a rigorous habit. You see, the average Regency-era Brit had a relationship with cleanliness that was a bit like a casual acquaintance, a friendly nod from afar rather than an enthusiastic embrace. This nonchalant approach to personal hygiene might have stemmed from a variety of factors, including the British climate, which offered enough rain to fill their teacups, but not quite enough sunshine to warm a good bath. For many in this period, a daily wash involved splashing some cool water on the face, a ceremony referred to with the grand title of ablutions. Now, before you imagine that ablutions meant a deep dive into a sudsy kingdom, think again. This was a more conservative sprinkle than a luxurious soak, similar to giving a houseplant just enough water to keep it dignified. Bathing, much like going to the opera, was reserved for special occasions. Those who indulged frequently in full-body washes were seen as a touch excessive, bordering on the hedonistic. Hot water was a luxury, as was the hours needed to prepare it, best saved for when the in-laws came to town and one needed to display utmost prosperity and perhaps persuasive cleanliness. For some, a proper bath was less about cleanliness and more about strategy. Regaling his friends with tales of his bathing routines, one dandified gent might confess, "Oh yes, indeed, I bathed last week. I am to see Lady Haberdasher tomorrow, so perhaps a second laundering might do for this fortnight." Such was the rhythm of a well-prepared suitor's hygiene schedule. In reality, the quintessential Regency bathing equipment featured pitchers, basins, and intriguingly, vigorous use of linen bath towels, known as flannels. These were not your standard modern fluffy options, but rather woven, and testaments to British ingenuity and restraint. Used with water and perhaps a dash of lavender essence, they managed to keep their bearers both fragrant and within the bounds of modest decency. Teeth, too, warranted attention, though the methods would be considered eccentric by today's standards. Cleaning concoctions of the day ranged from sage-infused powders to toothpicks fashioned out of goose quills. While minty fresh was a concept yet to be universally appreciated, the noble pursuit of dental hygiene was nonetheless undertaken with all the elegance of morning salon gossip. Let's not forget the fondness for perfume. A heavily scented handkerchief was a social lifesaver, not just for discretion, but as a fragrant flatmate to the less innovate wanderings of a fellow's natural aroma. The braver souls could be seen going about, a touch of eau d'embodiment wafting behind them like a flag of their own meticulous invention. So feel the laughter ripple through the social circle as Lord and Lady such and such promenade through the assembly rooms, their olfactory signatures trailing diplomatically behind. The symphony of scents creating a real-life ball of fragrances worthy of any Shakespearean farce. As you tuck yourself in further, ready to drift off, imagine the delicate dance of unwritten hygiene rules that twirled through the cobbled streets of Regency England, an era echoing caution and charisma in every scrub and splash. Soon, we shall turn our gaze to how these intrepid souls managed to keep their homes, themselves, and their peculiar sense of cleanliness through the seasons of society's ever-ticking clock. Picture, if you will, a dimly lit room adorned with flickering candlelight, casting gentle shadows upon peeling wallpaper. It's the year 1811, and we find ourselves slipping quietly into the home of the esteemed Mrs. Eliza Farnsworth, a lady of relatively respectable standing, if only in her own mind. In this enchanting abode, dust meets, a wink grandeur, and the aroma of rosewater mingles with, well, a rather more pungent bouquet one might politely refer to as life. Regency England, the cradle of tea time and empire, was also an era where personal hygiene was, shall we say, not quite yet the belle of the ball. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. Join me, dear listener, as we tiptoe across Eliza's creaky floorboards into the heart of daily cleanliness, or perhaps lack thereof. Without the modern miracles of running water and high-performance deodorant, your average day in Regency England began with a simple ritual of ablutions. In the case of Mrs. Farnsworth, this involved little more than a basin filled with tepid water, a slightly scratchy cloth, and a delicate dabble that could scarcely be mistaken for a scrubbing. It was, after all, a time when the convenience of a lukewarm splash was the zenith of personal refreshment. Yet being ever so concerned about one's appearance, Eliza ensured her toilette routine was, accented with a flourish of fragrant eau de cologne, applied judiciously like a final defensive posture against any olfactory affronts. Her hair, possibly holding treasures from weeks past, would be expertly coiffed and dusted with fine powder, adding a stately air, if not exactly air purity. Oh, but what of teeth, you ask? Fear not. Mrs. Farnsworth was not without her rituals. A twig dipped in salt or a crumbly concoction of soot and ground oyster shells did the charming duty of tooth powder. Perhaps it was not the minty breeze you might expect in today's world, but it was, nevertheless, a regimen that highlighted practicality over pomp. By now you may be wondering about bathing. While baths were certainly advertised as a luxury for the gentry, the ensuing reality of the task meant it was usually reserved for special occasions, or the rare day when both time and fortitude aligned. For many, like Eliza, opting for garments that could mask discolorations was a far more comfortable solution than simmering in a tin tub. Our dear Eliza, and those of her ilk, all shared a peculiar camaraderie with fresh air, or rather with the escapism that accompanied drawing oneself up, ignoring the occasional waft and embracing the day as is, unfragrant particulars be dashed. As the sun of this ordinary Regency day creeps higher in the sky, Mrs. Farnsworth would complete her toilette with a flourish of muslin, lace, and perhaps velvet if she were feeling particularly daring. All the better to counteract any lingering hints of an overly enthusiastic rendezvous with her morning ablutions. And thus would begin the day, wrapped in elegance and mystery, leaving open the question of whether today's air would be perfumed with lavender or, indeed, something less poetic. With a satisfied adjustment of her bonnet and a final spritz of cologne, Mrs. Farnsworth steps out into the streets where history awaits, each stone echoing with stories unwashed yet unforgettable. Let your mind wander through these cobblestoned paths, imagining whispers of yesteryear as you drift further into the tender arms of history's embrace, where every quiet discovery leads to the next gentle revelation. Imagine, if you will, a rosy-hued morning in Regency England, where the sun gently peeks through lace curtains, casting dappled light upon a quaint little cottage. Inside, we've a scene that might seem peculiar to our modern, minty-fresh sensibilities. Captain Bath's tub is rather lonely. And the soap? Ah, it was more of a decorative accessory, teasing from a distance rather than bearing any true hygienic testimony. Now, let us take a meandering stroll through the olfactory landscape of the era. You see, for the genteel of Regency England, cleanliness was arguably in the nose of the beholder. While grand manor balls were a feast for the eyes, the nasal passages might have perceived them as a veritable gauntlet of aromas. Eau de Cologne valiantly strove to tame the rugged wilderness of human scent, but the results were, let's say, a bouquet of mixed success. In this genteel landscape, bathing was the privilege of the few, or rather, the brave. Much like the Loch Ness Monster, it was occasionally cited but largely spoken of in hushed tones. The pragmatist of the time would sponge themselves with a damp cloth, fervently hoping that proximity to water would durably constitute clean. But dear listener, do not assume that the Regency folk accepted such aromatic ambiguity without a hint of rebel spirit. These connoisseurs of infrequent ablutions did recognize the perilous intimacy with dirt as somewhat undesirable, if only for the way it hindered the display of their social finery. As a result, varied hygiene practices began to emerge, with bathing becoming almost fashionable by the close of the Regency era. Taking a plunge in the sea, or a cold bath for one's health, was touted as a tonic for the body, mind, and spirit, and more importantly, it was a very Instagrammable moment with the technology available. True, for some, submersion in actual body-sized bathing apparatus was still regarded with the suspicion one might reserve for a talking animal or succotash that tastes surprisingly good. Yet tides were subtly turning, much like those of the Thames, notably less sewage-infested today, thankfully. The elite appeared to experience an epiphany, possibly linked to the influence of Beau Brummel. Yes, he was more than just a fashionista who invented modern menswear. Brummel was a pioneer of soap and meticulous grooming, often baffling his peers with such innovations as daily washing and, dauntingly, a clean cravat. But the realms of hygiene for the common folk unfolded quite differently. If the chance to bathe in a tub arose, it was a family event, with the eldest permitted first dibs on the tepid, soapy burgeon of water. By the time the turn of the poor, last sibling came around, the water might as well be more soup than bath, but hey, sibling solidarity was far more culturally valuable than sanitation. As we meander along Regency byways, let us pause to acoustic sail upon covetous gales of floral waters and oils. These restorative potions weren't aimed at washing away the day's grime, so much as overpowering it with verdant top notes of rose and lemon verbena. Gentle, appealing aromas made even the most pungent of companions palatable, if one weren't blessed with Georgian sinuses. Thus, drifting our gaze from creme de la creme to chimney-stack backstreets, let us tuck these quaint, curious, cleansing customs beneath our chin, like a heavenly soft blanket drawn around the chill of yesteryear's curious hygiene persuasions. For tonight, dear listeners, as the Sandman sprinkles his dreamy dust, let us saunter forward, bathing in the comforting knowledge that modern showers have saved us all from the tyranny of bygone spa days. And as our eyelids grow heavy, we gracefully segue toward a tale of more culinary diversions. In the softly flickering candlelight of a Regency bedroom, let's delve into the whimsical world of daily cleanliness, Regency style. Imagine yourself in a cozy, late evening reverie where every sound seems hushed by the weight of history itself. Picture servants bustling around, attempting their nightly rituals which, to our modern standards, might appear akin to some kind of alchemical experiment. The Regency period, floating between 1811 to 1820, wasn't exactly known for its stringent hygiene practices. However, folks back then had their own distinctive methods that can only be described as charmingly rustic. Baths, for instance, were the pinnacle of luxury, as they were about as common as an honest politician. Water wasn't plumbed through homes like it is today. Oh no, it had to be lugged in, bucket by bucket, heating the copper tub's contents to a simmering warmth. Something truly satisfying if you had a small army of servants or were particularly fond of cold baths. The irony of it all was that these genteel folk preferred to avoid bathing too often, fearing it could lead to health complications by opening pores to the pesky chill of the English countryside. Instead, they settled for homemade concoctions of perfumes and pomades, a veritable symphony of scents designed to mask three-day-old grime. Toothbrushing also enjoyed its early renaissance during these times, but revealing their pearly whites was not exactly a societal priority. With toothbrushes made from horsehair and surprise ingredients like charcoal or powdered brick in tooth powders, anyone glancing aside while grinning might set a different kind of firework display. Hair care, though, took a tad more seriousness, if only for appearances at Jane Austen-like balls. Men's pomaded curls and ladies' complex arrangements, imagine towering constructions held together with pins and wishes, were as intricate as they were impractical. Hair was washed infrequently, often, relying on fine-toothed combs to achieve a semblance of control. Any modern observer might be amused and alarmed at the cornucopia of creatures emerging from those tightly wound coiffures. Clothing cleanliness was another matter. A good fellow might wear a shirt for multiple days, turning it inside out when it needed a refresh. Imagine the sound of starch cracking like fresh snow underfoot as fresh clothing was donned, a noise accompanied by a symphony of rustling petticoats and the subtle clinks of stays being tightened. Beyond the adornments, there was the curious case of the chamber pot and its enigmatic presence under every bed. Almost clandestinely, it witnessed the nightly routine and many a morning view unfazed. It was the silent keeper of night secrets, emptied by servants who probably daydreamed of career changes during the process. With such cultivated caution around hygiene, it would take many more decades and the Victorian obsession with science and invention to bring about a true revolution in cleanliness standards. However, For now, we reside in this nostalgic snapshot, a bucolic, if less fragrant, practical approach to daily life. As we transition from these routines of old, imagine a candle being gently extinguished as its wisps of smoke curl into the comforting shadow of night. Our thoughts drift towards yet another themed dreamscape, one where housemaids conquer mountains of linens and footmen keep their secrets close, yet ready for another day's peculiar chores. Let your mind wander to a world punctuated by simplicity and charm, where every step echoes in history's tapestry, beckoning us forward with a delicate whisper. And so, we slowly drift into the cozy folds of night's embrace as the story continues to weave itself around your dreams. In the gentle embrace of dawn, where the cobblestones of Regency England lay, glistening under a shy sun, the art of personal hygiene was slowly unfurling like a modest peacock, meticulously arranging its feathers. Let us wander together into the quaintly peculiar rituals that transformed mere mortals of the era into something almost but not quite entirely unlike clean. Our journey begins in the intimate confines of a Regency-era bedchamber, a place where the cacophony of modern alarms was replaced by the soft serenade of birds and the occasional enthusiastic street vendor hawking wares outside. Amongst the floral wallpaper and mahogany furniture, one might find the pride and joy of daily ablutions, the venerable washstand. This piece of furniture, masquerading as a small, dignified gentleman, was essential for the morning ritual. It featured a porcelain basin and jug, brimming with water that was more than likely just a toe over lukewarm, having been prepared the prior evening by a devoted chambermaid or footman. In a display of valor, one would dip a cloth into the tepid liquid and proceed to perform what might be humorously referred to as a dry bath, where minimal water met maximal enthusiasm. The face and hands were the main focus, with the occasional dab behind the ears for the truly fastidious. The rest of the body, well, it was generally left to assume a respectable aura of mystery, swathed in layers of linen and lace to maintain an ever-so-elegant veil of ignorance towards lesser-known personal odors. Tooth care, on the other hand, was a marriage of practicality and peril. Wealthier denizens might employ toothbrushes that boasted bristles crafted from the hairs of boars. Alongside sat the apothecary's marvel, tooth powder. These composed a heady mix of chalk, charcoal and, dare we say it, a dash of cuttlefish bone. One might half expect to grow tusks before clean teeth, but nevertheless, it was a ceremony performed with much pomp. But what of the coif, you might ponder, particularly as Lady Whistletwit's towering curls might come to mind. Hair care was another indulgent production. The application of pomades, often fragranced with lavender or rose, served to bond the societal standing of one's follicles with a light affluence of scent. Washing the hair with soap, a biannual gala for some, was more Spartan in nature. But fear not, the liberal use of dry shampoos, composed primarily of starches, and the occasional pinch of orris root, kept the locks voluminous and at least tangentially clean. Noticeably absent from this daily routine was the modern marvel of deodorant. Instead, one might content oneself with diligent powdering, dusting enough talcum to elicit sneezes from passers-by, creating a protective veil against the less agreeable scents of daily life. While it's clear that Regency folk didn't share our definition of cleanliness, there's something comforting about their approach, a relaxed acceptance that, perchance, a waft of lavender might just do. The complexities of this hygiene regimen were less about empirical results and more a mime dance of public decency, a balletic nod to societal expectation and a capricious bit of personal flair. As we step foot from the washstand to the cluttered avenues of everyday life, let us not forget that though the cloaks of propriety were heavy, they were worn with bravado and a distinct sense of style. And as we wander toward the next chapter of this entrancing journey through Regency England's most secret corners, let us pause for a moment to savor the imagining of a morning, greeted not by frenetic haste, but rather by a peaceful routine as content with itself as an old tomcat dozing in the sun. With a gentle sigh, we drift onward, leaving behind the endearing chaos of Regency hygiene and tiptoeing into a new facet of everyday existence in this charmingly bygone era. Picture yourself, if you will, in a charming town, somewhere in Regency England. Cobblestone streets weaving through rows of quaint little cottages, each with its character and eccentricities, much like the people who lived in them. Our chapter today paints a whimsical portrait of bathing. Yes, the fascinating world of varied water-involved human rituals of the early 19th century. You might be imagining a scene not unlike Jane Austen's characters gliding elegantly through a neatly ordered slice of time. In reality, daily life, particularly hygiene, was a tad more pungent. Our story unfolds on a brisk morning, sunlight streaming in through speckled window panes, illuminating dust in the air, almost like snowflakes that decided to join the fun indoors. The residents of a modest townhouse are beginning their day. Let us peer into the comically intimate ritual of a Regency morning toilette. The lady of the house, Lady Prudence Wobbleton, starts her day with a splash. Not in the manner of a full-body immersion, mind you. Water was reserved, often only half a basin at a time. This was not just for conservation, but because heating it up was dreadfully labor-intensive. A kettle softly whistled in the corner, steam signaling the eats units. Or a start of this ritual. Lady Wobbleton dips a pristine cloth into the warm water, dabbing delicately at her face as if the water contained the very essence of purity, transported from magical springs rather than the muddy pond down the lane. Bathe indeed seems a grand word for this gentle dabbing, which resembled more of a negotiation with grime than a decisive battle against it. Aristocratic ladies like Prudence might have veiled themselves in the delightful fog of rosewater and lavender, aroma being an essential tool for concealing what one cannot efficiently cleanse. And what of the gentleman? Picture, if you will, the earnest Lord Wobbleton, grooming himself with a stern dedication that was almost philosophical. A man of principle, he believed a splash of eau de toilette behind the ears and an artful comb through his pomaded hair would make any lingering whiffs of yesterday's saddle ride acceptable. After all, within the society of polished surfaces and sentences, the olfactory, offences of hygiene inadequacies were often discussed with discretion or followed by a purposeful retreat to a more ventilated pace. Some witty contemporaries referred to such challenges as airs of distinction, since high society preferred to focus on more delightful topics, like the curious dalliances of their neighbours rather than unpleasantries concerning olfactory ambience. Even the Smalls had their moments of struggle. The young Wobbleton twins, Percy and Penelope, were engaged in a primitive version of hide-and-seek with their soap bar, a game that usually culminated in the soap winning, hidden under a bed, or mysteriously disappearing altogether. Venturing beyond house walls, we find the innovations of the bathhouse, not a missive from the Roman era, but a modest establishment where men gathered to discuss politics and business while soaking in mineral-rich waters. Consider it a distant relative of the modern spa, with far more writhe-inducing temperatures and a delightful and cool background aroma best described as earthy. Water flows like the gentle murmur of a small brook, an invitation to restfulness and reflection, until the brass taps ceased their singing and the end of the bath became a logistical maneuver to rediscover balance on the slippery floors. We might supplement our witty musings with laughter, imagining these dances upon the tiled floors, choreographed by the laws of physics more than dexterity. And so, having explored this whimsical tangle of taps and toweletties, we might leave room number 3 at the bathhouse, still abuzz with lively chatter that drifts off into the midday sun, hinting at the interesting social entanglements awaiting outside its steamy confines. As we gracefully tiptoe away from the cobblestones and the echoes of splashes, we move toward new vistas. Perhaps the next port of call on our bedtime voyage will offer an even deeper dive into the peculiar customs that wove the daily fabric of Regency life. Let us now gently unfold the story of Regency England's kitchens, an essential hub of any household, albeit frequently overlooked, much like dear cousin Herbert at family gatherings. Picture a world where the heart of cleanliness, or lack thereof, took place amid pots, pans, and a symphony of mysterious smells, some more menacing than mouth-watering. In the buzzing confines of these sculleries, there assembled a medley of individuals, notably the endlessly busy kitchen maids. These unsung heroes fluttered about with their handkerchiefs and aprons, like domestic pixies, steadfastly battling against the ever-present dust and grime. All this, while strategically dodging the occasional curious mouse or an inquisitive rooster that fancied itself an uninvited guest. But lo, the highlight of this culinary theatre was none other than the kitchen boy, a young lad usually fetching water barrels that weighed more than his small stature could reasonably manage. Despite his Herculean efforts, he was often rewarded with nothing more than a crumpled napkin of yesterday's stale bread, a peculiar reward that left him with an eternally perplexed look, as though pondering the mysteries of existence and how they pertain to slightly mouldy loaves. Upon every fortunate midday, the arrival of fresh produce brightened the kitchen like a royal parade, albeit frequently accompanied by a cloud of flies that danced online. They were having their own Regency ball. The cook, a formidable figure with a ladle that twirled better than any baton, abhorred these winged interlopers, but found solace in airing her daily grievances. Her exaggerated gestures were a form of operatic ventilation, equal parts theatrical performance, and necessary venting of culinary woes. As for bathing, a word uttered with the reverence one might reserve for a knight embarking on his holy quest, this was an occasional event in the kitchen too. The sink, filled to its brim with tepid grey water, served as a makeshift spa for scullery activity. There, potatoes were painstakingly peeled, one muddy layer at a time, their skins heaped with a sense of triumph. The floor itself became a great canvas of suds that mischievously spread like eager rumours, slick enough to warrant a sizable insurance premium should they exist in that era. The rising fumes from boiling cauldrons created a mystical fog, conjuring visions of faraway lands, perhaps a tropical beach, where one might actually enjoy a bath instead of fleeing from it. The feast of scents was an olfactory adventure, an unpredictable swinging between the divine notes of rosemary and garlic to the menacing wafts of singed cabbage. Ah, the cabbage, a vegetable both loved and loathed, known infamously as the phantom of the kitchen, leaving invisible traces to remind everyone of its presence days after its departure. Against this backdrop of organized clatter and haphazard chatter, the grande dame of the household, armed with only the tiniest spoon, engaged in an epic battle with her stomach's fortitude, sampling dishes and jesting about whether her husband's waistcoats could withstand another inch of laudanum-enhanced paunch. The banter was light and filled with glee, buoyed by the confidence that no matter the chaos, supper would be served and servants would scurry, thereby ensuring the domestic machinery continued to function, albeit on an intriguing mixture of determination and sheer good luck. As the day drew to a close, the kitchen quietened into a somewhat serene afterthought, like a ship lulling after the storm, a tempest of daily activity tucked away under the skirts of time. The embers in the hearth shimmered like secret stardust settling down for the evening, inviting any wayward soot into its glowing embrace. Here, within the cadence of collapsing chairs and yawning pans, began a rhythm, a gentle lullaby of tranquility, suggesting that even the daily grime of kitchens could evolve into a cozy retreat for dreams. And thus, as the candle's flame flickered its goodnight, we meander ever so softly into the smooth embrace of the drawing room's gentle elegance, where the quirks of Regency cleanliness continue to quietly unfold amidst genteel society's evening rituals. In the delicate hush of the Regency era, long before the days of smartwatches and smartphones, daily cleanliness was a curious affair of aromatic subtleties and pragmatic practices. During this time, England's inhabitants took a certain pride in their cleanliness, or at least in the appearance of it. As we wander through this tale, imagine yourself enveloped in the gentle scent of lavender mixed with the crisp, earthy note of soap, as we uncover what it truly meant to be spick and span in those days. It was an era when the reach for cleanliness was an exercise in cautious optimism and great restraint, As such, full immersion baths were rather like the vaudeville shows of the day, best enjoyed sparingly and considered somewhat of a spectacle. The procedure to take a bath was quite ceremonious, necessitating a laborious march of servants hauling copper tubs, preposterous amounts of boiling water, and measures of meticulous patience. While the occasional soak in tepid water was welcomed by the wealthier few, most contented themselves with a rudimentary dalliance with the wash basin. This delightful basin became an everyday intimate companion, not unlike a cherished confidant with whom one might share the secrets of a good scrub. Fingers danced across washcloths like nimble performers, waltzing between soap and skin in a ritualistic cleansing performance. It was a meticulous act, requiring grace and dexterity, ensuring that only the necessary realms of one's body were reached, lest one risk disturbing one's delicate balance of what possibly might be described as cleanliness. Now, let us drift over to the matter of soap. Yes, soap, that silent hero of hygiene. Then, quite different from its modern compatriots, soap in Regency times was a concoction of disparate intentions, often a heady mix of lye with fat, cloaked in the homespun fragrance of herbs. A prized possession, a bar of soap was treated with a degree of reverence usually reserved for fine porcelain or prize stamps. It offered a connection to cleanliness's elusive promise, whispering a sweet note of assurance amid the swirling scents, attempting to mask a more natural muskiness that pervaded all. But for those whose ears were tuned to the subtle languages of society whispers, perfume was the clandestine ally. A delicate dab behind the ear or beneath the cravat could lend the illusion of having bathed in an entire tub of orange blossoms. Regency folk understood well the power of perfume, an olfactory sleight of hand that could transform the mundane into the extraordinary, even if just until the next wash basin engagement. Gentlemen and ladies alike would often opt for the art of the dry clean, the act of simply changing into a fresh shirt or chemise. These garments, symbolizing the invisible airs of cleanliness, bore the brunt of the day's efforts with grace and poise. Servants, those unsung custodians, faced the soiled truths of laundry from dusk till dawn, ensuring the continuity of the charade of chic cleanliness. As we drift deeper into the century's twilight, the advancements in personal hygiene whisper to us from the horizon, painting a future where cleanliness would finally catch up with its more fastidious cousin, scent. Yet here in this era, with evening drawing its cozy curtain around us, we can peacefully ponder how cleanliness meant more than just hygiene. It was a charming dance of society's delicate ballet, with appearances and essence. Thus, as you lay your head to rest and close your eyes, feel the tranquility of this tale immerse you like the gentlest of cotton sheets, cozy, and where bathwater has no urgent business. Sleep soundly and dream in the soft glow of candlelight as we glide, sickering toward what awaits beyond the soapy serenade of our Regency journey. In the symphony of sounds that marked the day in Regency England, a peculiar hum would often come from the boudoir, a delicate cacophony that signaled the commencement of the daily toilette. Picture this: the rustle of satin, the clink of porcelain basins, and the gentle splash of water being coaxed from pitcher to bowl. It was an enchanting ballet performed under the auspices of a daily ritual we now affectionately dub as morning personal sanitation. While Regency households were not exactly awash with sanitation facilities, the era did boast its fair share of ingenious solutions. For most, the day's hygienic battle began with a sortie against the forces of grime and sweat. Cloistered within their chambers, one might encounter not the plush opulence of a modern ensuite, but rather the practical elegance of the humble ewer and basin, a pair more indispensable than the Duke of Wellington's boots at Waterloo. The water was often a cozy, lukewarm at best, having been fetched laboriously by servants from the nearest kitchen, where it enjoyed a brief acquaintance with the fire before embarking on its courteous journey upstairs. This method provided not a deluge, but a diplomatically sufficient supply for the ablutions ahead. Our Regency ancestors had mastered the art of make-do. with fragrant soaps, perhaps lavender or rose-scented cakes crafted by hands skilled in the subtleties of scent. One could cleanse away the dreams of the night. Those keen on finer details might also indulge in a tooth powder concoction. Alas, dental care hadn't yet crossed the straits into floss and fluoride territory. Instead, a dash of chalk or cuttlefish bone, ground to a fine powder, was considered quite the advance. As for hair maintenance, this was less about rinsing under cascades of water than about strategic brushing. For the fashionable lady, hair care involved wielding a boar bristle brush, like a maestro, coaxing oil and dust outward, transforming what might have been a sleepy bird's nest into something fit for a duchess. A man's morning regime might also include a splash of cologne water and the thoughtful rearrangement of sideburns, or the taming of unruly curls, which, with any luck, coiled themselves obediently by breakfast time. An intriguing tool for the truly adventurous was the bidet, a rarity and often a source of much conjecture. While it may seem ubiquitous in modern French hotel rooms, its appearance in Regency England was more of an exotic curiosity than the norm. Ah, what an avant-garde contraption it must have seemed. In terms of garments close to the skin, chiffs or chemises and underclothes would graciously partake in the wash-day rotation. While not a daily toss into the tub, undergarments were changed reasonably often, spurred on by both necessity and the social dictates of decency. Of course, where water lay scarce, the Regency penchant for dousing oneself in perfume provided the olfactory camouflage necessary for social survival. Smelling sweetly of bergamot or jasmine ensured one's presence was memorable for all the right reasons, and none of the roast dinners passed. With these rituals complete, our Regency contemporaries could finally lower themselves into breakfast society, smelling of lavender fields and rose gardens, as if they had effortlessly arisen from a poetic slumber in an English pastoral. As our minds drift deeper into this whimsical portrayal of Regency ablutions, we draw a soft curtain over our current scene, inviting dreams of waltzes and courtly graces to swirl through the mind. So let us gently rest in this dawn of gentle water and oil, as we ponder the practicality and poise of those who navigated the labyrinthine lanes of hygiene with charm and grace. Let those thoughts carry you snugly into contemplation as the night deepens and another chapter of quiet reflection awaits beyond the horizon. Picture this. It's a crisp morning in Regency England. Birds chirped in a gentle chorus. The sunlight peeked shyly through the grand windows of a stately country manor, casting a serene glow over the parlour, and the maids were up in arms over a controversial new hygiene trend. Yes, dear listener, today we are peeling back the silken layers of history to reveal the daily cleanliness routines of the era, which were, let's say, delightfully peculiar. In Regency times, cleanliness was not the all-encompassing ritual we know today. A person like Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, for instance, was not au fait with piping hot showers or fruity shampoos gracing his porcelain scalp. Instead, the men of Mr. Darcy's ilk might have begun their day with a brisk splash of cold water to the face, a sharp reminder that they were indeed alive. To the rest of us, this might seem like an icy affront to the senses, but to the Regency gent, it was the epitome of invigorating morning protocol. The finer intricacies of bathing, too, were somewhat different. A full-body immersion in a tub of water was considered something of a rarity, an event saved for special occasions, much like our modern-day spa days, but with slightly fewer cucumber slices and a good deal more soap made from animal fats. Plop. There went an aristocrat into a wooden bath, water permeated with lavender or rose petals for that extra touch of high society flair. One can imagine these noble souls contemplating the meaning of life as they sat amidst a soapy utopia, to the theme tune of Rub-a-Dub-Dub, a lord in a tub. Of course, not everyone had the luxury of an entire tub at their disposal. Many less fortunate men, women, and children of the time would take what was known as a sponge bath, the Regency version of winging it. A cloth, a dash of water, and a hearty rub-down were often all that stood between them and being mistaken for chimney sweeps. We cannot overlook the era's apparent fascination with smell masking. With the scientific breakthroughs of the day putting the total finer art of washing at a disadvantage, society collectively turned to the mystic power of perfume. Scents such as sandalwood, musk, and citrus were used with aplomb to elevate one's social standing with a single fragrant whiff. Imagine wandering through a Regency soiree, air thick with tinges of bergamot and jasmine, a sensory delight that possibly overwhelmed not just the senses, but any nearby canine's olfactory systems. The era's dental hygiene practices also drew inspiration from nature's array, as many folks brushed their teeth with toothpaste made of burnt breadcrumb ash or chalk. The subtle crunch and graze of the mixture seemed to both polish teeth and act as an exfoliant for one's gums. Colgate, eat your heart out. Regency fashion also imparted its own set of hygiene challenges, chiefly in managing sweat. Long gowns, heavy breeches, and the ubiquitous cravat surely turned even the mildest-mannered individuals into veritable ovens. Thus, the savvy socialite understood the critical importance of choosing one's fabric wisely. Linen, with its breezy texture, became a staple during warmer months, while wool, on the other hand, soared in popularity during the harsh English winters, proving that layered fashion woes are nothing new. As the day drew to a close, Regency folk settled into their beds, serenely unaware of the advances in sleep hygiene that the future held. In the quiet hours after dark, they nestled amidst feather-stuffed mattresses and blankets woven from heavy quilted fabrics. And much like the sleep rituals of ancient times, this bedtime landscape perfectly set the scene for our journey to the next chapter, whispering softly of the domestic routines that revolved around the heart of every Regency home. But for now, dear listener, let your consciousness mingle gently with the night and dream of simpler epochs and elegant escapades. As we tiptoe back into the candlelit corridors of Regency England, let's pause in front of an object that many would think an alien artifact from another world: the chamber pot. Ah, yes, the portable porcelain that sat under the bed, quietly emanating an air of necessity and mystery. Every night it performed its humble duty, and every morning it was whisked away, perhaps by the unfortunate trainee footman. Imagine the shock of our modern sensibilities encountering the simple, yet oh so essential role these pots played in the nightly rituals of Georgian bedrooms. And what of bathing, you ask? Bathing in Regency England was a spectacle that could rival a society ball, except that no one was supposed to attend. There was the weekly full bath, presided over not by a grand orchestra, but by a lone maid, armed with a kettle and some fragrant soap, a prized commodity. You see, the bathroom as we know it had not quite come to be. Water was to be hauled, heated, and poured into a tub that seemed just right for poaching another kind of game. Fancier folks might have a copper bath in their dressing room, while the rest made do with a wooden tub that could double as a fine rain barrel in a pinch. The whole process was rather like a tea ceremony. First, you'd steep yourself in tepid pool water, hoping it wasn't the chilly remains of someone else's recently departed ablutions. Unfortunately, privacy was not a luxury afforded to all, and servants might linger nearby to ensure no one ended up stewed to perfection. It was all a part of the service after all. Deodorant, or its absence, provides another layer to the aromatic puzzle of life in this era. In a world sans antiperspirants, the people of Regency England had to improvise with aromatic oils and herbal concoctions, perhaps a little sprig of lavender here, a dab of bergamot there. This was an era when being redolent of nature was not just a possibility, it was an inevitability. Let's not neglect our good. Friends, the teeth. We'll hum softly to the rhythm of the tooth powder ritual. A concoction of chalk, salt, or even crushed cuttlefish bone might be used to fend off decay and desperation alike. Though the brushes might appear more like something to tame a horse than a mouth, they were wielded with the dedication of any dashing hero fending off a snowfall of plaque. Dental visits were rare, and toothworm extractions could be a slightly less than magical experience. Talk about gnashing one's teeth. Now, imagine, if you will, the daily ritual of dressing, which, given the time it took, might as well be declared a sport. Ladies toppling into layers upon layers, cinched into stays and draped in yards of fabric, gents buttoning and buckling themselves into tub-thumping regalia. It wasn't so much an act of getting dressed as it was a cunning strategy meeting where wardrobe decisions were dictated by rank, the season, and occasionally the ability to breathe. And as the candles flicker low, let your mind amble gently through the lingering vapors of Georgian colognes and rose water. It's time to ease your imagination into the vibrant tranquility of night, deeper into the human tapestry woven with soap, starch, and a charming dash of eccentricity. As evening drapes its velvet shadows over the cobblestones of our tale, let's embark on a fragrant, albeit somewhat steamy, journey into the bathing customs of Regency England. Prepare yourself for a sudsy saga that bubbles with historical undercurrents and the occasional rubber ducky giggle. Imagine, if you will, dipping your toes into a bath quite unlike those pristine porcelain whirlpools we're accustomed to today. Instead, picture a sturdy, wooden tub, somewhat resembling a small barrel that's come dearly in cost from the local cooper. These tubs were often brought indoors only for the grand and momentous event of a bath due to their cumbersome nature. For bathing was not merely a matter of hygiene, but a carefully staged domestic production, often involving the entire household. Because why not make cleaning oneself more of a spectator sport? Our voyage to this soapy shore shows us that baths, though rare, were rather luxurious affairs in the Regency era, a cherished moment to command a servant or two, or in some households, the resident family cat, to fill the tub with warmed water fetched laboriously from the kitchen kettle. Such dedication makes one think twice about grumbling at the prospect of a lukewarm shower today. Now, as we delve deeper, it's important to note that bathing wasn't seen as a frequent necessity. Instead, folk of this period believed wiping oneself down with a damp cloth could achieve adequate cleanliness, what we might affectionately call the spot treat method. Fabrics, such as linen, prized for their hydrophilic properties, proved a popular choice for these personal cleansing endeavors. Beyond the intimate confines of the domestic tub or cloth, wipe-downs, public bathhouses, remnants of which inspired those Roman bathers of yore, still dotted the urban landscape, though these institutions carried the added complexities of shared water and questionable hygiene practices. For public baths offered patrons a communal experience of the freshest sort of second-hand water knowledge had yet to improve. Yet, allow us a moment to pay homage to the pioneers of scent, a dedicated cohort driven not by cleanliness, but by a desire to outwit their olfactory sins with perfumes. Indeed, in Regency England, a veritable symphony of odours reigned, each note combining to craft a bouquet that would make any modern nose twitch. Essential oils, distilled from an Eden load of botanicals, became a staple among those hoping to mend the air around them. Lavender particularly did sterling service, masking the less polite elements of human aroma with its sweet, floral embrace. As our tale immerses deeper into the sensory delight of scented waters, let us not forget the era's obsession with the therapeutic value of sea bathing, inspired by physicians. Yes, even back then they had their eccentric prescriptions. People flocked to seaside communities to throw themselves into saltwater, despite the frigid temperatures and the assumption that early morning was the optimum time for a rejuvenating dunk. After all, nothing says wellness like a brisk, freezing dip, which was thought to cure everything from melancholy to the occasional sneeze. Before slipping away from this lathered reminiscence, let's raise a candlelit toast to those dedicated bath attenders and early adapters of the detachable showerhead. For as inefficient as it might sound today, this period laid some of the foundations for our relentless pursuit of cleanliness, one wooden-tubbed splash at a time. So, as our narrative treads lightly toward the next act of history's tale, envision yourself gently wafting away on a cloud of lavender-scented dreams, cleansed, soothed, and perhaps now slightly pruny from our shared time in Regency waters. Ah, the early 19th century, a time when Regency England tiptoed along the lace-edged line between high society elegance and the more pungent realities of daily life. As the foxgloves drooped under the weight of the morning dew, so too did the elaborate coiffures of the gentry, laden with enough pomade to warrant a small warning label. This chapter lifts the porcelain lid on just what it meant to maintain one's cleanliness during a time when high fashion often ran counter to the notion of practical hygiene. Imagine yourself stepping into a bustling street in Jane Austen's era, where the air is filled with the sound of horse-drawn carriages clattering past and the softer swish of ladies' skirts brushing against the gravel. These streets were an aromatic mixture of sooty chimney smoke, the faintest whisper of foregone lavender sachets, and the lively bouquet of a bustling marketplace. Yet beneath this olfactory orchestra lurked something more authentic. For the genteel gentlemen and gentlewomen, the day began not with a cacophony of alarm clocks, but with the gentle chiming of a distant church bell, summoning them to consider gravity's persistent tug on their complicated attire. But before donning the layers requisite of appearing properly disrobed by comparison, a person must freshen up. Enter the modest regimen of Regency ablutions, a lukewarm affair. Bathing, dear listener, was as much a social event as it was a cleanliness endeavor. For some, this meant a delightful trip to Bath for a dip in the acclaimed healing waters. For others, the preferred method took place in the privacy of one's own dressing room. Incidentally, the dressing room bore little resemblance to a modern medi-spa. It was more of a utility booth lined with washstands, perhaps bearing a single porcelain bowl pitcher filled with water. Ideally, the water was tepid at best, a measure thrifty enough to convince you that cleanliness must indeed be next to godliness, given its rare admission to the earthly plane. With no daily showers to count on, bathing was often limited to a more sporadic affair, perhaps once a week, or whenever the family cook stopped fainting upon entry. Meanwhile, those who served as the esteemed heads of household engaged in a ritual known as dry cleaning, an undoubtedly more convenient and less water-reliant approach, involving vigorous brushing and the liberal application of scented powders. Talcum powder, for when you wish to smell as though you've just emerged victorious from a wrestling match with a particularly fragrant bouquet. Now, let us turn our attention to teeth. The stalwart defenders of charming Regency smiles had limited arsenals to protect their fortified positions. Toothbrushes existed, albeit with bristles fashioned from boar hairs, an asset to ensuring enthusiasm in one's dental routine, lest you get acquainted with the somewhat abrasive tooth powders of the time. These powders were made of mildly alarming concoctions, a sprinkle of charcoal here, a dash of brick dust there, effectively turning every tender scrubbing session into a small exercise in masonry. And when it came to hair care, pomade was the vogue. Not just any pomade, mind you, but generous globs fashioned from the luxuriant mixture of bear fat and fragrant oils. If one was exceedingly fortunate, fragrant oils meant citrus rather than the alternative, a musky concoction that would have given even the hardiest London candle the soul of a saint. As twilight descends, whispering its restful promise, picture yourself amid a grand ballroom where the brilliance of chandeliers reflects off polished marble floors. Your cloak, dear listener, has never felt lighter against the nape of your neck, a small mercy in the complex dance of staying upright and maintaining composure as you exchange witty repartees amidst the swirling aromas of powder and Suits pomade. And so, as the night draws you into its gentle embrace, take comfort in knowing that by the standards of any era, the pursuit of cleanliness is ever evolving, much like the stories we weave to make sense of our daily adventures. Allow your thoughts to drift upon the gentle waves of time, ready to be carried onward. Picture for a moment, dear listener, the bustling household of an upper-class Regency family. Imagine the grand hallways and genteel chandeliers, the air heavy with the scent of lavender and perhaps a hint of tea lingering in the background. Now, imagine how such a family's prudence extended not just to their social engagements and financial ledgers, but to their bathing practices, or lack thereof. In Regency England, cleanliness was something of an acquired taste, a taste often left unexplored. Baths, if you can call them that, were taken perhaps once a month, or on special occasions when the stars aligned, or an aunt with notoriously high standards was expected for a visit. Speaking of stars, if you were branded an eccentric by claiming to bathe more frequently, you'd probably have an astrological chart to either blame or laud. But why, you ask, were they so sparing with suds and water? Well, water had the frustrating tendency of being cold, not the invigorating wake-up call kind of cold, but the bone-chilling variety. So unless you were among the luxurious few with access to hot water, you might as well have invited Jack Frost to join you for tea. On top of that, many believed that frequent bathing could lead to illness. Yes, indeed. There was a logic that claimed water, much like an overly inquisitive neighbor, could let unsavory elements in. Better to stay dry, keep your defenses robust, and let's not forget the process, an orchestration of operatic proportion. First, the servants would lug immense amounts of water, blessings upon their backs, to the bath. Once enough had been collected, the water would then be heated, a laborious activity requiring its own committee meeting. And there you'd sit, afloat in but a tepid spell of warmth before the air would snatch the heat away like a greedy magpie. So, in place of frequent baths, enterprising minds could turn to the art of dry bathing, wherein they'd refresh themselves with a pleasantly abrasive rub-down. Towels, which had the remarkable ability of capturing everything you didn't want on a person, became unsung heroes. They were regaled in ballads for their grit and fortitude. A quick wipe, a dab of cologne, some powder generously sprinkled here and there, and you would be set to waltz through your day, convinced quite firmly of your own freshness. To supplement these rituals, a fragrant array of pomades and scented oils fought a valiant but dubious battle against any natural aromas you might generate, a strategy as bold as it was fragrant. An added spritz of eau de cologne, an entire 6-page poem advising its application could likely be composed. Shove post haste. For hair, talcum powder wasn't just an option. It was an entire philosophy, a way of life. Rub some on your scalp, comb it elegantly through, and find your glossiest curls returning to form in full flowery glory. Actually, not flour in this instance, though I'd wager your locks might have resembled a fine loaf or two if the cook had a say. Despite all this, rest assured these practices were undertaken with a sense of pride and decorum. After all, the goal was not to obscure oneself in a haze of perfumes and powders, but to exist harmoniously with one's surroundings, an aromatic symphony of wood, smoke, and the occasional faint hint of lavender soap met with every nod and curtsy. As the fire crackles gently in the hearth, and you imagine the midnight lamplight casting shadows across intricately wallpapered walls, allow this scene to settle around you like a comfortable, familiar embrace. Know that such quaint habits and historical peculiarities are but another delightful snippet of our shared past, amusing relics that remind us how far we've come, or not, depending on your last long-haul flight. But do not fret, for there are more wonders still to explore from these bustling halls to the cobbled streets outside, whispered tales dying for softly murmured illumination. Transition slowly now, lingering a moment longer in this tale, before drifting effortlessly toward the next silent secret, wrapped snugly within the covers of your imagination, as the first light of dawn hesitantly peeked over the mist-laden moors of Regency England. Many a household found itself gradually stirring from slumber. Ah, Regency England, the era of empire waistlines and the occasional health-challenging stoop of attempting to avoid visibility through sheer curtains. But let us turn our attention to a rather peculiar aspect of this genteel age, the morning ablutions. In those times, the art of bathing was not so much a daily affair as an intermittent hobby. For the average gentleman or lady, the thought of immersing oneself in a bathtub full of water was received with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for tax documentation. Infrequent at best, a full bath was a momentous occasion involving more logistics than a military campaign. Most mornings began with a minimalistic approach to cleanliness. The wash basin. These charming ceramic or pewter vessels were brimming with water that had often been sloshed a goodly distance from the kitchen well. The lukewarm temperature, a tribute to the flurry of activity that accompanied its retrieval. A delicate splash upon the eyelids might suffice as the refreshing dawn ritual, while a soapy cloth dabbed strategically around the elbows lent the assurance of freshness. Oh yes, soap. A marvel of craftsmanship, Regency soap was an assertive concoction comprising lye, sure to wake anyone up faster than the strongest of coffees, a dab of tallow, and the occasional aromatic whisper of lavender on lucky, a daze. The effect was a forceful reminder that cleanliness and peace of mind in this era were often achieved through endurance rather than indulgence. For those particularly committed to the morning routine, a personal groom would deftly wield a remarkable invention, the Cornish cream. This was less dairy and more a soft, foamy cleanser, believed to caress the skin much like a sheep might, with or without its wool. Suffice to say, skincare approached new textures during Regency times. However, for notable gatherings, one couldn't rely solely on the reliable wash basin ritual, particularly if in danger of encountering a duchess or, heaven forbid, an earl. Thus, those fashionable enough to possess a weekly calendar and a social life often found themselves in the arms of an extravagant bath. Such an event required orchestration akin to that of a symphony. Innumerable kettles transported piping hot water to the bathing chamber where, amidst considerable steam, one might finally indulge in the luxury of all-encompassing cleanliness. Hair, the crowning glory, faced its own conundrums. While modern shampoo is as common as the sun's rise, Regency England relied on more simplistic and often aromatic solutions. Rosewater rinses offered a floral fragrance to accompany the charming ringlets, while vinegar might substitute in more vinegar-scented circles. Pomade slicked through men's hair ensured they smelled, at least, somewhat removable from the kitchen. Yet, the grand bath was not just a cleansing act. It harbored potential for profound introspection. Indeed, to float amid warming suds, one's thoughts might drift to ponderous matters of love, economic pressures, or the latest scandal involving Lord Whoever's latest inappropriate frolic. So, as we drift in the warmth of imagination forward, it can seem fitting to leave Regency citizens to their cleansing peculiarities and frothy muses, as we gently close this chapter of wash basins, tallow soap, and steamy musings, and prepare to unveil the next facet of Regency life's charming mysteries. And now, as we let the history settle its lather of soapiness, we gracefully segue into the continued exploration of the gentle, exigent quirks of Regency England, a perfect way to slip effortlessly into the Hollywood backdrop that awaits us. As we tiptoe through the cobblestone streets of Regency England, let's pause to consider the fate of a rather essential component of daily life: washing clothes. Picture, if you will, the Regency laundress, a figure both revered and feared, akin to a mythical creature with arms of steel and a spirit fortified by soap suds. Our laundress is a champion in a world without spin cycles or softeners, battling against the ever-present enemy: grime. Laundry during this age wasn't simply a task, it was an event, a kind of hydrodrama that played out in backyards and kitchens across the land. The weapon of choice? A formidable brew of soap, water, and elbow grease, with soap being either made at home, often from rendered animal fat. Try not to ponder that recipe as you drift off, or purchased as a luxury for those more affluent. This wasn't the dainty, floral-scented stuff we spritz on our linens today, but a robust, lye-based concoction potent enough to strip dirt, paint, and perhaps mild tarnish off silver in one enthusiastic scrub. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, clothes underwent a rigorous pre-wash inspection. Garments, particularly undergarments that saw substantial action thanks to layers and limited washing opportunities, were assessed for their resilience before enduring the wash day trials. Those that passed were consigned to a large tub where they basked in steaming water, almost hot enough to make a respectable pot of Earl Grey. Imagine as you listen to the rhythmic sloshing sound, the laundress leaning over hefty washboards, her hands sculpted by repetitive motion, wringing out the water as if it divulged secrets only she could interpret. This scene is steeped in labor, but also unity. In some households, this laborious task was a shared one, creating a community of women who swapped village tales and possibly a few scandalous whispers amidst their toil. As the water cooled, so too did spirits perhaps, but never the resolve. The clothes would then be ushered on their next leg of the journey, rinsing. Surely you envision a gentle affair. Alas, nay. Imagine being strung and soaked by exuberant streams of cold water designed to freshen the fabric, or more correctly, to sluice away lingering traces of soap, as if clothes were caught in a perpetual rainy season. The entire household saw its role as garments, now cleansed, were pressed in imperious irons heated by blazing fires, a power move of sorts, declaring dominance over wrinkles. Those irons, mind you, were temperamental fellows, their heat erratically maintained by a dedicated soul who closely monitored their embers as one might an unruly child or an errant sheep. With skill, they forced their yield smooth, each stroke a testament to the laundry day's ruling champions. Finally, our garments would dry, displayed in all their crisp glory lines stretching across yards, turning spaces into makeshift parade grounds, where rows of linen shirts and bloomers flapped majestically, cheering into the gentle wind of a bygone England. And thus, the whole drama of laundry swayed with a certain enviable cadence, both tiring and cleansing, a great equalizer in the human condition, at least one with clean towels. Wouldn't it be quaint and terribly tiresome to visit such tales of domestic bravery in person? As you lay beneath your soft sheets, remember that the Regency household was all about community effort and endurance. The very essence of clean ensured that the day closed with promising comfort, brought forth by those who labored intently, reminding us of the touching serenity beneath the chaotic washboard in symphony. Now gently recline your head on the metaphorical cushion of Regency recollections as we prepare to weave through yet another of its fascinating curiosities, the ones that shaped, polished, and carried society through its handsome array of days and nights. As it happens, even in the tranquil setting of Regency England, the art of daily cleanliness came with its own peculiar set of comedic rituals. Imagine, if you will, a world without toothpaste tubes or fragrant suds from your favorite soap commercials. Instead, visualize a stone basin, tepid water, and the ever-sensitive nose of an English gentleman confronted with the remains of yesterday's efforts at hygiene. Ah, Regency gentlemen and ladies, they were a peculiar breed. Take, for instance, the morning ablutions of Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy. Oh, what a sight that must have been. With great dignity, he would approach the basin, a pitcher balanced precariously in one hand as if performing an elaborate ballet. And as the water splashed into the bowl with a sulky gurgle, so began his daily battle, face versus soap. But not just any soap, dear listener. It was a hardened bar, seemingly crafted of the same material as English limestone. With every swipe, a little bit of epidermis was sacrificed to the cleanliness gods, providing just a hint of raw color to those famously brooding cheeks. All the while, the conscientious rasps echoed softly, juxtaposed with the prudish restraint of not quite meeting the gaze of oneself in the looking glass. Now we must spare a moment in our cleansing chronicle for the dental habits of our Regency companions, a time when the rich aromatic breath of minty freshness was but a fantasy of poets and dreamers. Instead, one might fashion a tooth-cleaning rag from strips of muslin, dampened slightly and dusted with a mix of burnt bread and salt. Yes, dear friend, ashes and apparently salt somehow signified the height of oral hygiene, and presumably a bale of muslin saw more of one's teeth than a good chewy lamb shank. In a grand residence like those in Bath, one could perhaps stumble upon an early contraption resembling a toothbrush, a curious device with horsehair bristles. Picture, if you can, the challenge of wedding your molars to this equestrian grade floss, a delicate dance of avoidance where gags meet grace midway. And so, freshened, or rather less offensive, our protagonist was ready to face the day's trials in garments lightly misted from a pre-dawn airing on the lawn. For attire was another matter altogether, with garments washed by the curious yet auspicious method of beating them into submission on rocks near a stream, or perhaps, if you were particularly fortunate, boiling them to within an inch of their fibrous lives. The truly privileged might witness the marvel of washing day, an event much like preparing for battle, but with soap and linens instead of spears and shields. Meanwhile, societal ladies approached this sacred ritual of cleanliness with equal parts dread and decorum. Bathing would occur infrequently, typically involving an announcement akin to reading the banns in church. The physical effort of disrobing from seemingly endless layers was an Olympic event in its own right, rivaled only by the feat of making oneself decent and new. Soap for these fair maidens was just as insidious. A pungent blend designated Castile would make its grand entrance, along with the occasional nod to lavender, a scent intended to suggest a mystic garden, but often embodying the overwhelming aroma of 1,000 sachets gone awry. Yet, the regimen of beauty persisted. Hair powder, that ashen veil of status, would frequently eclipse the goal of cleanliness, forming a perimeter of hue rivaling that of a winsomely aged wig. Roses and a tar of jasmine stood sentinel-like against the intrusions of daily odoriferousness, their every step to correct what mundane rituals could not. As the sun slumbers beneath the kindly English hills, we've surfed across another tide of history's perfumed absurdities, where cleanliness was not next to godliness, but perhaps adjacent to an entertaining array of human complexities. Prepare yourself, dear dreamer, for yet another jaunt through the wonderfully peculiar customs that color our shared past. As the calming evening light settles over our tale, with lamps aglow and the air now perfumed by flickering candles, we drift back into the Regency era of England, a time as primly polished as a freshly buffed hobnail boot, but presumably with more soap involved. The pursuit of cleanliness in this genteel era was a peculiar dance, often managed with the grace of a ballroom waltz and the humor of a country jig. Let's ease into the chaise lounge of our imagination, shall we? Picture yourself in a snug Georgian-style bathhouse where steam curls upwards like a cat stretching lazily by the hearth. It's here, beneath the vaulted ceiling, that the society's fitful relationship with cleanliness truly comes to life. Bathing, you see, was a bit of a spectator sport, viewed with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, much like attending an art installation featuring a bed made of pickled lettuce. In the elite circles, a plunge into a seawater or mineral bath was considered both invigorating for the body and fortifying for one's conversational repertoire. For some, like Beau Brummel, the dandy maestro of sartorial elegance, bathing wasn't just a necessity. It was an opportunity to polish one's wit as finely as one's boots. It is rumored that Mr. Brummel would spend hours in his tub, debating the merits of a perfectly starched cravat, while trying not to wrinkle like a well-aged raisin. Yet, for many, daily ablutions were decidedly less aquatic and more aromatic. Perfumes were practically splashed about like a French cologne skirmish looking to occupy the olfactory palace. Ladies of leisure, bedecked in muslins and muses, might spritz themselves with floral essences, while gentlemen preferred heady concoctions of bergamot, perhaps in an effort to ward off any persistent ghosts of yesterday's collation. Libations and libations, the only difference here being the choice of bottle and purpose of its contents. Should one possess fondness for a vigorous rub-a-dub, there were the ubiquitous washstands, toppling over in bedsit corners everywhere. Imagine the dance of the water jug and basin, partners in a timeless ritual, with the towel as a refereeing bystander, looking on like a loyal but unimpressed pug. We find an intriguing paradox here. While water was available, its frequent interaction with skin was eyed with the wariness reserved for a suspiciously jaunty suitor with more intentions than titles. Cold and hot, the water knew its place, less as a friend and more as a formidable acquaintance. Meanwhile, as you're lounging in this gentle reverie, consider the scandalous commotion of the Regency laundry day. For the mere mortals, without household staff, It often involved boiling cauldrons resembling a witch's brew, with shirts and linens rotating in sequences that would make a windmill dizzy. Soap, an innovation rivaling the brilliance of any mechanical marvel, was nonetheless a steadfast ally in this frothy battle against grime. But as dusk gently blankets the garden maze of bygone habits, it's reassuring to note that even the most perfect of polices would eventually meet its nemesis. A surprising splash from a passing curricle, perhaps, or a zealous dessert bound for adventure beyond its plate. For now, we shall tiptoe away from this bubbly scene of Regency rituals. Take a deep breath, inhaling the soft, soothing scents of yesteryear, a combination of lavender, tales of linen, and a hint of wry Regency wit. As you cuddle further into the plush folds of your imagination, let us glide gracefully toward the next chamber of our story, where the enigmas of everyday elegance unfold. Nestled within the elegant drawing rooms of Regency England, one would find a society well versed in the art of appearances. But these grand masks of civility barely hid the peculiar dance with daily cleanliness. Oh, let us tiptoe through the powdery mists of history and take a peek beneath those satin gowns and waistcoats, where the soap and water of yesteryear met with decidedly selective application. In touching upon hygiene, one would first encounter the bar of soap, a compact repository of delightful absurdities. No mere sliver of cleanliness, this. First, emerging from the soapy cauldrons of Castile, the humble bar had by Regency times become an imported luxury to many. Infused with fragrant oils and promising a whiff of the exotic, this soap pretended to be a cleansing agent, even if it sometimes left its users wondering why they still smelled somewhat lived in afterward. Imagine the morning routines of a typical Regency denizen, where the term full bath might ring dramatic as a line on the stage of the human condition. Baths, you see, were infrequent affairs, the kind where filling the tub was an activity more anticipated than a visit from the royal post. In truth, bathing might be skipped altogether in favor of a dry bath, a delicate euphemism for applying powders and perfumes while hoping for the magic of chemistry to transpire. Sprinkling powder was an art in itself, akin to dusting fine china, as one attempted to hide more perspiration than mere humanity could bear. In these sprightly endeavors, one must not overlook the Regency gentleman, whose morning must-do list included a skeptical look at his own reflection. Having conquered the wild battle of bedhead with a liberal application of pomade, a concoction with enough grease to slip from the head of London to the high seas, he would next assess the critic in his looking-glass. With a sigh only an Englishman could perfect, he'd wield his shaving razor, a design precarious enough to make any modern safety razor blush. The courageous few dared the full shave, while others prudently fashioned cravats high enough to provide excuses for less meticulous efforts. The Regency smile, too, was a spectacle of social gymnastics. Dental hygiene, stand aside. Toothbrushes were indeed making their entrance upon this historical stage, often made from boar bristles that might double as piano wire. Toothpaste concoctions, fashioned with erstwhile enthusiasm, were not much better, boasting ingredients such as brickdust, ideal for buffing armor, but rather more grim on the gums. A quick swig of posset or spiced wine might have masked the taste, turning grimaces into courteous grins. Curling the mind's eye towards the realm of apparel upkeep, we find a different kind of humor. Regency clothes were crafted for the aesthetic rather than ease of maintenance. These ostentatious garments, often bedecked in lace as frothy as alehouse chatter, dodged regular washing like a disinterested suitor. Laundresses, those unsung heroines of the period, faced the Sisyphean task of navigating linens capable of containing a tea party and a ball within a single ruffled sleeve. As detergents and machines were the stuff of dreams, these valiant labourers relied on lye so caustic it could probably etch limericks into stone. Nods to personal cleanliness also extended to the home itself, though sweep and swish was more a hopeful whisper than an earnest plea. Chimneys clogged with soot surrendered to a small army of energetic sweeps who, like human canaries, chirped their way through the flues, hoping to see daylight again. Floors were scrubbed with such vigor that the servants tasked with their cleaning reportedly developed biceps capable of rivaling a pugilist's. Fireside rugs, forever assaulted by the clutches of dust, bravely maintained their posts as if stoically preparing for 19th century fame as impressionist subjects. With these scenes tiptoeing through your mind, let yourself drift gently upon the feather bed of dreams. As chapter 21 beckons forth from the tapestry of time, let bygone notions of cleanliness settle dreamily in this sleepy history, leaving you to ponder, was everything really cleaner back then? Or was it just more interestingly dusty? As we saunter onwards through the fascinating fog of Regency England's less than gleaming personal hygiene practices, we find ourselves in the midst of one of society's most unsung battles, the sartorial standoff between fabric and grime. Picture, if you will, a time when every garment worn was warily eyeing the intricate dance of sweat, dust, and the occasional errant dollop of sauce from last night's dinner. You see, for the fine folks of Regency England, clothing wasn't just about style, although they certainly had some opinions on that front. It was about longevity and supreme strategies of reusability. In fact, an elegant game of how many days can I wear this waistcoat before it stands on its own was perpetually afoot. Men and women alike donned layers that not only shielded them from the elements, but also conveniently absorbed unseemly odors. Accessorizing with subtle sophistication, they might tuck a small vial of perfume into a pocket, an olfactory shield to fend off any indiscriminate aromas that threatened their poised composure. Bathing, as we may yet empathize with their plight, was considered more a luxury than a necessity, akin to the modern mid-afternoon nap we all know we deserve but rarely indulge in. The brave souls who did venture into the bubbly embrace of a bath once a week, if they were feeling particularly decadent, often employed an entourage of basins, jugs, and enthusiastic advice on the degree of tepidness the water should achieve. Now, if you've ever survived the trepidatious task of hand-washing your beloved knitted jumper for fear of it becoming excellent material for a dollhouse duvet, you'll perhaps understand their trepidation. The fine woven fibers of linen shirts and delicate muslin dresses needed meticulous care. Stains were stealthy adversaries, their defeat reliant on a well-armed battalion of lemon juice, lye soap, and no small amount of elbow grease. Yet, for all the effort invested in cleanliness, for some individuals, this was still not quite sufficient. You might take comfort in knowing that the extravagant gentlemen and ladies of the Regency era sometimes strategically chose to lounge around in undress attire, essentially the sweatpants of their day. This choice, if you ask the sino-philosopher of canines curled up at the foot of many a Regency bed, suggests that even those at the height of fashion craved the comforts of practicality now and then. And let's not neglect to appreciate intertwined methodology and social activity. For if your servant were truly hasteful with his scrubbing of your preferred cravat, you could amiably forgive his transgression by mounting a hunt for a more pristine mode of distraction. A stroll in the rose garden, for example, which could, presumably, mask any persistent discontentments in the freshness department. In the spirit of unity and camaraderie, or perhaps just one-upmanship, within these social spheres, exchanging relics of personal experience in dealing with the daily grime became both a sport and a venue for gallantry. Oh dear, I see you're still wrestling with that mud down your hem from last week. Might I offer my laundress's card? Translation: my own elegant cuffs have yet to see the sights of a laundry line, but my resources remain vast and at your disposal. As night approaches, with its promise of restorative tranquility, we pause to consider these rituals of reflection and revitalization. The Regency dwellers' efforts at cleanliness, though sporadic to our standards, serve as a reminder of the human penchant for perseverance in the face of persistent practical challenges. And so, with a gentle nod and a wink to our bygone friends clad comfortably in their pragmatic hosiery, we close our chapter, assured that even through the lens of history, humor, and soap, there remains wonder in the ordinary. As you drift deeper into the allure of sleep, keep with you the notion that beneath every layer of history is a well-worn coat of character, one that's just as rich with stories as those shared by the stirrings of dawn we'll explore next, as twilight's gentle embrace tucks itself around the rolling hills of Regency England. Let us wander back into a time when cleanliness was not merely a chore, but a dance of daily ritual, one that could make today's stringent standards seem like a futuristic dream. Imagine, if you will, a world where bathing was not just about getting clean, but an opportunity for a delightful rendezvous with one's own reflection. In the dim glow of candlelight, the Regency-era bathroom, if it could indeed be called a bathroom, was as much a statement of personal whimsy as it was of necessity. Picture a genteel setting. A copper tub, nestled strategically in the corner of one's boudoir, surrounded by a cacophony of floral wallpaper busy enough to induce dizziness. It stood proudly like a forgotten relic of Roman sophistication, waiting to be filled with water, carted laboriously by a parade of servants armed with kettles of boiling water. The process itself could take longer than a modern epic film, intermissions not included. Our Regency ancestors viewed bathing not as a daily ritual, but as a bi-weekly event, if one were industriously hygienic. The tub was usually filled to a height, catering more to the jugular region than the hips, fostering an intimate, existential bond with one's knees, which were forced to peak like curious children. This aquatic enterprise was often overseen by the household's favorite soap, a solid, chunky bar made of animal fat, as fragrant and creamy as an enthusiastic sheep, often laced with a hint of rose or lavender to dare and overpower its chemical innocence. But fear not. Regency folk had their shortcuts. For those keen on economizing their time or avoiding frostbite, there was always the option of a sponge bath. These simplified affairs allowed individuals a swift cleanse with a bedfellow of linen cloths while standing with audacious dignity in front of a chimney-side basin, leaving their visage suitably dewy and country squire fresh. Hair care followed its own sense of timeless elegance, or reckless abandon, depending on your perspective. Dry shampoo was a precursor here, consisting often of violet powder, which, sprinkled generously, could transform a cascading head of hair into a scented cloud of purple-tinted illusion, a Regency-era mirage. In a curious twist of fashion, wigs continued to strut through the proverbial catwalk of style, providing both headwear during powdered extravaganzas and a convenient veil over one's rare and, shall we say, strategic washing habits. As we tiptoe across this nightly corridor of the past, let's pause to appreciate the personal scent that pervaded this era. Perfumes, concoctions of herbs and exotic flowers were as indispensable as waistcoats and witty repartee. A dab of this fragrant confection behind the ear could transform a gentleman into a walking garden party, often trailing behind them a more poignant air than one's personality. For the outdoors and those keen on fresh air confidence, Regency enthusiasts took brisk walks, hands clasped behind their backs, immune to the concept of showers pre- and post-exertion. Although footpaths could resemble a liquid obstacle course from frequent showers of a different sort, shoes were attentively polished symbols of one's social standing, almost philosophical entities, reminding one of where they stood, quite literally, in the societal order. As the moon casts its silver thread across the cobblestone streets, and our gentle venture into Regency cleanliness draws to a close, take a moment to ponder the curiosity and resilience of a time when water and soap, simple yet formidable allies, told their own stories in the grand tapestry of history. Our gentle sojourn through these bygone rituals permits us to rest, the whisper of ivy-clad tales lulling us further into the realms of a peaceful slumber. And as eyelids grow heavy and the candlelight dims, perhaps in the dawn's embrace, we might reawaken in a world both familiar and peculiar. Curious to continue our gentle exploration of history's enchanting yet soporific secrets, floating between the gossamer strands of Regency England, one might imagine that daily cleanliness was a trifling affair, a casual wiping down with a well-worn rag, perhaps, under the assumption that dust was just a historical accessory. Let's waft down memory's lane to understand how the dandies and dames tackled the daunting prospects of daily dun and grime. Picture, if you will, Miss Euphemia Underwood of Derbyshire, a paragon of Regency hygiene who believed deeply that cleanliness was next to godliness, or at the very least, next to politeness. Euphemia would commence her day's ablutions with a deftness akin to a concert pianist about to tackle a particularly florid sonata. She began with a thorough rinsing of her hands, face, and neck with a bracing splash of cold water from the finest porcelain basin. It was a lively ritual, rather like a cold water symphony for the senses, designed to wake up every nerve in her delicate complexion with a shriek of surprise, no less. Corsetedly confined to the routines of the time, the other bodied parts were, alas, not treated to as zealous a cleanse. Drawing pins of modesty seemed firmly in place, as bathings involving full disrobing were often considered excessive and, heaven forbid, unhealthy. A full-body wash was reserved for those rare occasions where social engagements in the height of summer necessitated such daring behavior. However, for a lady like Euphemia, this adventure in full-scale bathing might occur no more than a couple of times a season, a travesty by modern standards, an extravagant formality by regents. Thus, strategically placed cloths and a strategic sense of humor were tools invaluable to any socialite with an aversion to being the aromatic center of attention. Euphemia's maids would attend to her garments with considerable alacrity, whisking them away for a vigorous brushing down. The clothes, after all, bore the day's excretions, dust, perspiration, and an abundance of detectable life experience. Clothing had a lifespan that included countless cleanings and repairs, until both threads and patience wore whisper thin. Consequently, certain items, such as the ever-crucial petticoats, found their way into the laundry far more often than their showy outer counterparts. Yet one could not fulfill the Regency elegance criterion on appearance alone. Oh no, there was the matter of olfactory impressions to consider. Undertone well understood by Euphemia. Enter the intriguing staples of scent management: potpourri, pomanders, and scented handkerchiefs. These fragrant accessories were as vital to a lady as her ability to conduct a spirited conversation over a game of whist. Concealed with cunning in pockets, these aromatic disguises lent a veritable mini-bouquet to fend off any wafting worries that eau de naturel might cause an unforeseen loss of suitors or friends. Men, it must be said, had their own draconian regimen, and none more so than Captain Thaddeus Bumblehatch. Rumoured to have taken up the possession of a soap lonely enough to imply it was picked as an afterthought rather than an act of hygiene heroics, Thaddeus approached daily cleanliness as akin to the unravelling of enigmatic naval charts. His ablutions were robust, yet occasional, practiced with a grim determination, splashing water with the force of a naval squall. Hair was slicked back with a simple solution of bear's grease, which, ironically, might have left the societal bears grateful to the backhanded tribute, were they possessed of any awareness. Between the rigorous schedules of washing and the elegant swishes of scent disguises, the people of Regency England danced an intricate waltz of appearance, scent, and social acceptance. Their efforts were earnest, imbued with quiet comedy, as starkly as the fleeting glimmers that dust motes create in rays of a sun-drenched window. And so, having garnered such a range of historical insights and imaginings about the era's delicate dance with hygiene, we segue, with all the grace of a nightingale landing softly upon its roost, to our subsequent reverie. Let us drift further into these streams of history's tapestries, threaded with irony and care, one calm inch at a time. Ah, dear listener, as the curtain gently falls on the Grand Regency stage, we find ourselves ready to delve into the final act of our story. Yet before we tuck you into the history-infused quilt of slumber, let's explore one last curiosity of the day. That delightful habit of perfuming oneself, even if soap and water dared to remain elusive. Yes, amidst the cobblestones and candlelight of Regency England, clouds of fragrant mists wafted through parlours and ballrooms. Like invisible tutus in an olfactory ballet, these scents were indispensable. For in an era where the daily wash was as common as a unicorn prancing down Pall Mall, perfume was the savior of social niceties. A delightful concoction of lavender, rose petals, and citrus notes floated on pastel breezes, ready to make even the most aromatic of societal wanderlust somewhat tolerable. Lemon verbenas whispered promises of sunshine, while rosemary evoked culinary dreams, a veritable herbal escape plan from foot odor. Now, don't assume our Regency folk were entirely oblivious to a good thorough scrub. Bathing might have been an orchestral event, requiring a veritable ensemble cast of servants in attendance, but it did happen, occasionally, often for health rather than comfort, as doctors of the day had rather interesting ideas about the body's need for fresh water. One could hardly go around risking wielding this precious resource too liberally, lest the pores rebel and bring on something awful, like good health. But what of those vibrant dance floors, where to dance was to chance a feint among a crowd? It was here, in rooms brimming with both fragrance and fortitude, that social standing was often ascertained as much by one's scent as by one's sense. Eau de Cologne wasn't merely decoration, it sang sweetly of status, its melodies appreciated by nostrils of the elite. Little bottles neatly stowed away in delicate reticules were as essential to an evening out as the carriages that ferried their owners to and fro. These sweet aromas often existed in protest against the odorous backdrop of daily life. Markets, streets, and homes offered a potpourri of smells, some romantic, many a tad, more pedestrian, roasting meats, coal smoke, and horse evidence. Conservatively, one could say the Regency olfactory experience leaned towards robust rather than refined. And yet, even as society danced its way through history, the simple act of anointing oneself in scent bridged the gap between propriety and personal hygiene. Smell became both an art and a conversation starter, though rarely did one inquire too directly about another's ablutions or lack thereof. So you see, as Regency England waltzed with its own eccentric signature, it was these little nuances that elevated daily life. The twirls of silken skirts, the gentle clink of glass perfume vials among chiffon and lace. Gentlemen and ladies alike, armed with both charm and scent, drifted through a world that was as fragrant as it was fascinating. With this final quirk in our pocket, dear listener, it seems only right to let this history-filled reverie nestle under its covers. Perhaps, as your eyes gently close, whispers of powdered wigs and lavender fields will lull you into a tranquil dreamscape, where Regency figures gracefully glide like spectres of yesteryear. Their tales linger in a cloud of laughter, mischief, and sweet-smelling mysteries. For now, our historical hold gently releases, and I wish you the softest of dreams and the soundest of slumbers. Good night, dear listener, until history's gentle hand pulls back the curtain again.